Hi, welcome to the Rittner Floral School in Boston, Mass. I'm Dr. Steve Rittner, and it's a pleasure to welcome you into one of our classrooms today. The time of year, it's fall, and we've got a really neat video planned for you. I think you're going to really enjoy it. One of the things that comes across people's minds when they're doing their fall designs are, how can I make them interesting? And in this video, we're going to show you 3 tips to make your fall designs interesting, a little bit different, and have a lot of fun while doing it. And they're really easy tips. The 3 tips are, number 1, use interesting bases or containers. Number 2, pick unusual or interesting combinations of flowers. And number 3, consider using some of what we call buried substances. These could be berries, they could be small little crab apples. I call them buried materials. Try to use some of them in your designs. Now, all the designs you're going to see in this video incorporate one or more of these 3 techniques. Our staff, all of us, have been working very hard here at Rittner's to come up with something interesting for you, and I think you're really going to enjoy it. Let's start off. First of all, you see 2 designs here, and the 2 designs we're starting with are deliberately very different one from the other. One is very large, and the other one is very small. But the reason we're showing these 2 together is they give a good example of how you can take these principles and work them in any scale design. The design here on the right, let's start with this one. This design is amazing. It is quick and easy to do. What are we doing on this particular design? Well, first of all, we're making use of what I call buried materials. It's really not a berry per se. These are red sentinel crab apples. They are made courtesy the great folks of Blooming in Beloit, Wisconsin. It is an amazing product, and they practically design themselves. Notice what we've done here, though. We've taken the crab apples and we placed it into an unusual container. The container is perfect for the fall. It has the oranges and the yellows and so forth. To reiterate that, we even have in the water some millimeter balls that happen to be gold. It gives a really cool effect. A big design like this could be used in your entryway. It could be used in a bay window, anywhere where you want to make an impression. It is quick and easy to do. All you have to do is get these great materials, drop them into water, and boom, there you are. It's amazing. But notice the 2 approaches: interesting container and what we call use of buried type materials. Now let's go from a large piece to a smaller piece. The smaller piece is an interesting one in and of its own right. It is different than the larger piece. If we look at it carefully, you have a cylinder. A cylinder is an everyday kind of container. So we're not really doing it so much in the container. Rather, in this particular one, it's the materials. And the materials are varied and they are quite interesting. If you look at this closely, we've got 2 of the medium-sized sunflowers. We've got some orange alstroemeria here. The sunflowers right here, the alstroemeria here, a little gerbera. Notice it's an interesting variety with an orange disc inside, and this amazing red celosia. This is really cool. These flowers were made courtesy of Riccardi Wholesale in Boston. They are amazing and they add so much. Notice also we're using the buried materials here through the design, and that adds an added touch and dimension. A little bit of the physocarpus from Blooming of Beloit add to it. So what we have here, really, if you think about it, is the use of interesting combinations of materials coupled with the use of berries to create a lovely little centerpiece that could work very nicely on your table or possibly be placed in a workstation and give a very cool effect. So notice, from large to small, we can use these techniques. Here's one that's a little bit bigger. Now, when you look at this, first off, it looks like but another round arrangement, I know. But there's more to it than that, because if you look at the design, not close up, but from a distance, you'll notice it's a little bit more complex. This design, again, is making use of a container that is a little bit different. It's kind of pretty, and all kinds of interesting materials in it. We have in this design some of our cremone palms, some of our gerbera, some of the orange alstroemeria. The green dendrobium orchid shooting out of it gives a really neat effect. And notice a huge number of buried materials here. Rose hips are placed here, some other buried materials, again, from the folks of Blooming in Beloit. Oh, and this stuff is fun. Kangaroo paw. It's interesting stuff. So again, interesting container, interesting combination of materials, and yes, definitely making the use of some of our buried type products certainly adds to this design. Let's get progressively bigger. This design is very sweet. Let's go to one that happens to be a bit bigger. There we go. This is pretty. Now the container is an average container, albeit a larger one, but when we look at the way the materials are handled, once again we get into the same thing. These materials practically design themselves, making use of some of our standard green and purple hydrangea, some of the mini callas, some of our palms, some of the physocarpus, which really gives a great effect to it. And then the thing is just loaded with some of these amazing berries from the folks of blooming and Beloit. We even have some down below the water level. Oh, and there's also a little kale from McCarty's worked in here. You can see this design has an amazing combination of materials, and again, the use of what we call buried materials to give a fall design that is a little bit different, and I think very, very attractive. So what else do we have here? We've got a few other things to show you. This is another example here of a large, what I would call a large water-based design. This one I think is even more elegant. The other one gives us lots of product, but this one definitely is an elegant kind of showing. Notice the material again, the use of materials in here. We've got here an everyday kind of container. It's a cylinder, but it's the combination of materials and the berries that make this interesting and unusual. We have in this design some of our chocolate roses. They are absolutely amazing when we look at them. Look at this. Isn't this amazing? It's beautiful. We've got 3 of our chocolate roses here. We've got some of our hydrangea, and this is the seed pod lace hydrangea from the folks of blooming Beloit. Some of our dendrobium orchids, celosia worked in through here. It is truly an amazing design, and then just amazing use of our berries above the container, into the container, even a few below the water level, gives a really distinctive, elegant design for use in the fall. Let's take this a step further, and let me show you another example, my viewer, of what I would call a very elegant treatment in terms of fall designing. Isn't that gorgeous? Isn't it beautiful? I mean, to me, this is fall designing at its best. Now, this uses all 3 principles that we're talking about here. In this particular design, you have unusual materials, dendrobium orchids, sunflower, some of the hydrangea that happens to be the seeded pod variety, some of our physocarpus, and then lots of berries. Under the water, above the water, here. It gives an amazing effect. This design is absolutely gorgeous, and it definitely gives a good example of what we're talking about when we're talking about making use of these 3 major principles to come up with interesting fall compositions. Now, here's one I think you guys are going to enjoy. This one is kind of funky and fun. You may have seen this container in one of our other presentations. We did something called wired water designs, and we brought this particular base out. It is a glass container shaped like a boot. It's really cool. But look what we have in this. Dendrobium orchids, and they're under the water level. Gives a really cool effect. That style of working things under the water level has become popular lately. And then on the top of it, again, some of our seed pod lace hydrangea, and we've got a couple of orange gerbera, a medium-sized sunflower, some of our alstroemeria over here, dendrobium shooting here, and some of our rose hips in terms of buried materials. So we have in this design, I think, a very, very good combination of all 3 principles in use. You've got an unusual container, you've got some very, very neat materials in terms of combinations of unusual things, and of course, the presence of what we call buried materials gives a really, really cool effect. Now, bases can be glass bases that are interesting, but there are other kinds of bases out there too, and I don't want to neglect them. For example, if we're talking fall, certainly fall is the time where we all think in terms of football, and here happens to be a base. It's not a container, but it's a base, making use of a foam football. This was made courtesy the folks of Smithers Oasis. They provided us with this base, and it is an amazing base that we can use to come up with an interesting effect. Now, in this particular design with a football, we have a novelty effect, just as we have a novelty effect with the boot, but the novelty effect is brought about by our football made out of foam. Everyday materials in terms of palms, but I think you can see it's the base that really does it for us on this. So when we're coming up with fall designs, let's think also in terms of novelty ideas, because we can sometimes come up with some very cool things with the appropriate container or with the appropriate base. But wait, there's more. This is really cool. You're going to love this one. Isn't this gorgeous? Now, most of what you've been seeing up until the football happened to be foam-based. I'm sorry, happened to be water-based, pardon me, or water-based designs. But this particular thing is foam-based. Once we went to the football, we were dealing with foam media, and this particular design is also foam media. Now, if you look at it, we've got a container. It's an unusual container. It feels very aged. It's ceramic, and it is a new container. It's very, very pretty, but the container starts off the theme. And then an interesting combination of materials, some of our chocolate-colored roses, a sunflower, some of our filler material, and then the use of some of our physocarpus here and there, and berries. Berries up here, and look, a whole mass over here forming line as well as mass in this design. This is an absolutely amazing design, and it would work very, very nicely in anybody's home. And if one is good, two can be better. And so, my viewer, let me show you a companion piece, because I could see a pair of these being used in somebody's living room very, very nicely. And they are paired very nicely because we're using the same container. There are some similarities in terms of color and a congruence of materials with our sunflowers here, but there is a little bit dissimilar. There are some things in this one that aren't in the other one. If we look at this particular piece separately, and we will, you've got some really, really cool things going on here. We have, in this particular design, our medium-sized sunflowers, some celosia from Riccardi's, absolutely beautiful stuff. We have some of the use of the absolutely great Physocarpus Diablo, which is right over here, 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 and here, basically defining the parameters. This is a one-sided circular design. It's not two-sided, it's one-sided. And then we've got some amazing hydrangea that we got through the folks at Riccardi mixed in with it. You've got a really, really nice combination of materials, and then the use of our, what I call our buried materials here work through it. So you can see the three major principles here: container, unusual combination of materials, and then the use of berries through the design. Well, what do you think, my viewer? I hope that you enjoyed this video. Our staff here has been working very hard to create these things so that you can see them. At Rittner's Floral School, we feel that floral designing can be quick, easy, and should be fun. And if you try these three principles, using interesting or unusual bases or containers, mixing unusual combinations of flowers together, and by all means play with some of the wonderful buried materials that are available to us at this time of the year, you can come up with some amazing results for your fall designing as well. I'm Dr. Steve Rittner. It's been a pleasure having you into one of our classrooms today. We thank you for coming in to Rittner Floral School.